Hey everybody, today I am going to be talking about my top 10 favorite movies of the year 2022. I saw more current movies this year than I have in a very long time, at least since I was a teenager. There were movies this year that were satisfying and totally came together for me, but that was kind of rare. I think, obviously we're seeing quite a difference in movies and they're not to the level that they used to be. And that certainly is sad because it's very rare for a movie to really grab my attention and really excite me in the ways that it used to. But that said, there were movies this year that I really thought were special. And even if a movie didn't fully come together for me, there would be something about it that really stuck with me. So we will start with the first one. Again, I said this is going to be in no particular order, but I'm going to go with Vortex by Gaspar Noé. And this was a very different movie for Gaspar Noé, at least that's how it seemed to me, just because he stripped back all of the things that he's known for and gave us something that was more introspective. He's looking at existentialism and the weight of mortality without all those typical gimmicks that he normally goes for. So all our pleasure centers are going to be fully intact this time, and there are no epileptic seizures. But it's still very much Noé, and he's still using a lot of the things that he's known for, a lot of the staples. He's just finding a way to kind of rein them in, and they're a little bit more subtle. And so everything, I think, felt more homogenous just as a story, and I think that elevates Noé's work overall, because I will say, I don't think he is known for his writing and for his stories. I will say this isn't as entertaining as a lot of the Noé films that we're used to, and I would say it's actually a very unpleasant experience, and yet there was something about it as I was watching it. It's just like, it is painful, it's torturous, and yet I found myself so compelled to keep going. This is about two older people at the end of their lives, and you can feel every breath that they take, and you can feel how tired they are. It's like, trying to place you in their world. And perhaps it's more personal, but a lot of these ideas really resonated for me this year. Yes, it is still very much a simple experience for Noé, to a fault, I'd say, yet the meta aspects and everything are always kind of hovering over everything. Next, I'm going to go with Pearl, and this was directed by Ty West. And when I reviewed this movie initially, I kind of complained about it feeling a little bit too skeletal, and I do still feel that way a little bit to a degree, but I will say this movie has really grown on me over time, and I think a lot of it has to do with Mia Goth's performance, which I think is one of the best performances of the year, hands down. Just the sight of her in that red dress where she's wielding an axe with that crazed look in her eye, I don't know, I think she reminds me of Sissy Spacek in Carrie, or like some sort of doe-eyed rag doll from hell, and it's just, I cannot get enough of it. I think that she was a star that is born in the wrong era. She belonged more in the 1970s, I think. I think she would have been great in movies directed by Robert Altman and Brian De Palma and Terrence Malick. And it is the off-kilter kind of charisma that she brings to her characters. You just can't teach that. It is inherently very cinematic, I think, and this is obviously a prequel to the film X, which came out earlier this year. And I think that X, while, it's very well made, I think it got weighed down a lot by the commentary it's making on voyeurism without really getting a firm grasp on it. Whereas this film, I think, is a lot more cohesive, and it is more simple, but in a way that I think really serves it, because this is more like a colorful fantasy that is twisting into a nightmare, and it is all, built around a magnificent anti-hero. And I think the combination of like the MGM Technicolor late 30s look mixed with this slasher genre, that's something that we don't see very often, whereas something like X, mixing the kind of voyeuristic commentary with the 70s slasher, we've seen that done many times. This one has a much more emotionally meaningful center to it, and I think that final monologue that Mia Goth does at the very end of the movie, it's just so unexpected and one of the best moments of the year for me in movies. Next, I'm going to go with RRR by S.S. Rajamouli, and I think that this is easily one of the best movies of the year. And I would say, on a basic level, I was the most entertained by this one of anything else. And I think it's because it just has everything you could possibly want in a movie. It's very cinematic. It's also full of drama and tragedy and thrill. And just the music and the dancing and the color of the East, I think it just adds a lot more spice and makes it much more of a riveting experience than a lot of the action movies that you do see these days, especially in American movies. And it's emotionally powerful because a lot of the themes are very relatable to people. This is a celebration of friendship and a celebration of love in the midst of political turmoil. And it is all very committed to the experience and the excitement of it and just the world. I absolutely recommend this movie for sure. If you just want to be entertained, this is the one. Next, I'm going to go with Tar, and this was directed by Todd Field. And this is a very sterile film, but it's very careful, very meticulous, kind of chiseling of a character, a very enigmatic woman at the center of this movie. And I think this movie is a perfect example of when you have just a great collaboration between a a great director, but also a really great actor. Both serve each other, and I think one can't exist without the other. Cate Blanchett, I think, gives just a virtuosic performance here. I think it is one of her best performances, which is really saying a lot, just how deep she goes into the character and how much she just fully embodies it. Her research and everything, it's so evident, and her focus. And it's a hard performance to do because this is a portrait of a person who we never really get to know that closely. And a lot of what we're experiencing is more it's more how other people perceive her, how the public plays a huge part in her identity and just, building of her ego. And I think it was kind of a refreshing film to see because I think it really does dig into the idea of the cancel culture and public shaming a renowned artist, but also how big or small a role of identity politics can play in somebody's career like that. It's rarely explored with conviction, and I kind of like that this film did that. It is sometimes a little bit too pointed, and I'm still not sure how I feel about the third act, and I'll need to see it again. Metaphorically, I don't know, I think it felt just a little bit off, but I am intrigued to see it again, and it really does linger. It has such a quality to it for sure, haunting even, I'd say. Next, I'm going to go with The Banshees of Inisherin. And this is directed by Martin McDonagh. And this is another movie that I found to be quite satisfying for the most part. It is a lovely kind of melancholy tale. It has a touch of whimsy to it, a touch of the grim as well. And this is a movie that reflects on, I think, time and stagnant living and the meaning of our relationships. And certainly this is about the end of a friendship. And I like the idea of just this bitterness always existing in this movie, and it grows and grows and grows as the film goes. Sometimes our simple pleasures, the things that we look forward to each day, can start to chip away at us, and eventually they can make us feel empty and bring us into an existential crisis. This did feel very much like a part two for Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell, because they obviously, first were in the film In Bruges together, and this did almost feel kind of like a sequel, even though the characters are very different, the feel of the movie is very different. They work together so well. And this is a lot more reflective and meditative piece, and I think, if I went back and watched In Bruges, it would feel maybe more powerful now. And while the humor didn't always land for me completely, I love how it really peppers every single moment with a lot of kind of honesty and hope. And it does really keep the film from being one note. I think this movie has great acting, of course, great scenery of Ireland, and it really does emotionally resonate. Next, I'm going to go with Top Gun, and this is directed by Joseph Kosinski. And I'm not really a Top Gun fan, so I didn't get to see this movie until a little bit later after all the hoopla died down. But I do think as a film, it is one of the most well-packaged, and I think it's one of the most self-aware and one of the most in tune with, I think, what Americans really want out of their entertainment. And I really think that's what I admire about it the most, because a movie like this, especially when you consider the simplicity of the original, obviously that was very much a symbol of the Reagan era. It's like we do not live in that kind of world anymore, where they have that like nationalistic romanticism, that ideology. And here we are with Tom Cruise finding this great resurgence in his career, a great third act where he's kind of returning to his roots of why people loved him in the first place. And he found a way to keep that very like Americana simplicity, as well as balancing all of the meta angles. And it is nostalgic, absolutely, but there is a lot of maturity, I think, and minimalism that felt fresh about this particular film. Yes, it is silly and it is cheesy, but I don't know, there was more reflection in it. It felt like they were pushing the story and the idea of Top Gun forward and arriving at something new by the end of it. And I can't say that about a lot of movies these days. It is satisfying, but there's also a bittersweetness. But when I look at just mainstream movies, especially ones that are coming from an existing franchise like this is the one that easily, of the year, has its shit together the most. Next, I'm going to go with Red Rocket, and this was directed by Sean Baker. Now, technically, this movie came out at the end of last year, I will say, but I didn't get to see it until January of this year. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it on this list because I am absolutely obsessed with this movie. I've seen it several times now, and every time I watch it, it grows on me. I think this is one of Sean Baker's toughest challenges as a director, and I think he excels with flying colors. And I think the reason why it's so difficult is because this is the first time, at least that I've seen, it's the first time I've seen Sean Baker work with a character here, a main character that is truly unredeemable. And he's pretty much terrible from every single angle you look at it. But this is also not a story of redemption. This is a story of a character's downfall. And I don't know, that makes it naturally more melancholy, but there's so much humor here. I think Baker's ability to find the poetry in so much of like the seedy back alleyways of America is unprecedented at this time. And I do think that this movie is a very sad depiction of American life and the delusional dreams that we chase in this country. And when I look at these characters, I never get a sense that Baker is trying to romanticize them or try to judge them. He's giving us a very honest look at things. It is brightness tinged with an artificiality, and that gives it a weird kind of aftertaste, which is, I think, necessary but very powerful. Again, probably one of the funniest movies I've seen all year, one of the most twisted, and certainly one of the most meaningful. I love this movie. Next, I'm going to go with The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, and yes, I know this movie isn't the greatest movie here, and I don't know, there's a lot of issues with it for sure. And to me, when I look at it with perspective, it certainly has the feeling of, yeah, it's like a second-rate version of David Fincher's Seven. But at the same time, I was so pleasantly surprised by this movie. And maybe it's my bias, maybe it's, that I'm such a fan of Batman, but aesthetically and tonally, this is the live-action Batman I have been waiting for my entire life, because it properly felt like Batman. It's like Nolan has his own interpretation of Batman, but it's very auteur and very much his specific point of view. It doesn't feel like Batman, but this is really honoring, I think, what Batman really stood for and what I initially loved about him. This is Batman for the type of people who really love that like detective film noir sort of art deco quality to it. And there is an artfulness here that I've really been missing in other Batman versions. And I think it's the music that fully brought it together. I think that's the one element of it. If we took that away, I think the whole movie crumbles. But there's a lot of stylistic choices in the film that really pleased me. I was very impressed just with so much of the ensemble as well. And I walked into this movie, I think I said it in my review, where I really had no idea what to think. I didn't know much about it. I don't think I had even seen a trailer of it, but I immediately felt, the feeling I did as a fan of, Batman the Animated Series and Batman Mask of the Phantasm, that sort of stuff. It felt like a window back into that world, and I started to feel like a kid again. I was driving around at night listening to the Michael Giacchino score, just being like, Gotham, like all the time for months afterwards. And I thought this was an interesting take on the rejection of the outlaw, when it comes to the vigilante and how that's developing over time for sure. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in this movie. And yeah, while it doesn't come together for sure, it was a pleasant surprise for me. Next, I'm going to go with The Glass Onion, and this is directed by Rian Johnson. And I think this is a great holiday film. It feels like a nice slice of cake after dinner, and it is obviously a puzzle, a whodunit sort of murder mystery with all kinds of zippy, colorful characters. It's a little overwrought, I think, in terms of the writing, and when you really look at it with perspective, the puzzle is not as complex as it seems, but at the same time, there's so much of it that feels clever and sharp, and maybe not as strong as Knives Out was for me, but I found myself really entertained, and I was laughing throughout. And I think it really achieved what it set out to do. It has whimsy and it has creativity, as I said, but it also really sets itself apart from the original film aesthetically. And Johnson, I think, reminds us how great these murder mysteries can be and why you want to keep following these characters. I hope that they make more. Next, I'm going to go with Babylon, directed by Damien Chazelle. And this movie was a train wreck. It was annoying, and it is cringy, and it felt chaotic, and it felt brash, it felt preachy, and yet there is something about it where I feel like I'm still processing it, and I still cannot stop thinking about it. I am almost equally frustrated with this film as I am riveted by it, and I cannot say that about any other film this year, I think. And I cannot believe that Damien Chazelle got away with this. This movie is a shock. It is the most shocking movie, I think, of the year, in the sense of it reminds me of those big gambles that they used to take in Hollywood, and they would take, big, bold films that were ambitious like this. It is properly cinematic, and they really, really went for it. There is a desperation here and a desire, I think, to break through something, even if it is a monumental fail. Obviously, a lot of money went into this movie, and at times I think the gaudiness kind of stifles the aesthetic, even though I know that's part of the point. But at other times, I think that the gluttony and everything, the sensationalism, is on display in just the best ways. Chazelle I usually think of as a very squeaky clean kind of guy, and obviously he's a lover of historical films and all of that, but I think he really did put a lot on the line here, and yeah, it certainly didn't pay off, as I said, and yet there is something about it that I find more satisfying than a film like La La Land. Obviously, that film is way more structurally sound and cohesive, but there's something about this one that felt a little more exciting. There's a little bit more grit to it. There's something just intriguing about it. And I associate this movie, I've been saying it a lot, what this movie is for Damien Chazelle is kind of like what Casino was for Martin Scorsese in terms of how I view that movie, because Casino has so many moments in it that I love, and yet ultimately it doesn't come together, and so I'm always frustrated by it. And yet I constantly find myself returning to it, and I don't know. I could see that being a reality for me with Babylon. We'll see with with perspective. But yeah, I think it was one of the more surprising movies of the year. And that was a great gift to have at the end of the year when, I feel like I've lost a lot of hope for especially American cinema. But that is the video, and that is the year 2022. Guys, let me know what some of your favorite movies were of the year. I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.